First and foremost, we'd like to welcome all of you, or in some cases welcome you back to our far-flung correspondent panel. May I ask, as I did last year, who was here last year? Once again, we have nothing new to talk about, but we'll try our best to come up with something new. Okay. There aren't too many things happening in the world, but okay. So my job is to be your moderator for the next hour or so, and first and foremost, I should introduce our wonderful participants. First and foremost, we'll go through the veterans. We have Grace Wang, who is coming to us by way of Toronto and China. We have Gerardo Valero, who is coming to us by way of Mexico City. Olivia will introduce when she arrives. And then with the veterans, we have Krishna Shenoi, who is coming to us by way of India and Dubai. We have Wael, who is a veteran, but in the first year, you may recall, he was held back by a small volcano. And because he's coming from Cairo in Egypt, last year he was held back by a small revolution that was taking place. Okay. This year, nothing happened to be going on, so he decided to join us. Pablo Villaca, who is coming to us by way of Brazil. And then our two new people we have coming from both ends of Europe. From Western Europe, from the United Kingdom, we have Scott Jordan Harris. And then from Eastern Europe, we have Michal Oleszczyk. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
That was perfect.
Perfect. Let's give them a round of applause. First and foremost, because they are so nervous. Okay. All right. So first, let's take some moment to ask our correspondents to introduce where they are really coming from. What is life like? Let's start with our new people. Michal, tell us about Krakow.
Okay. Well, I've been living in Krakow for the past 10 years, but I'm originally from a very, very tiny town in the south of Poland, which used to have one cinema theater way back in the day. Well, I moved to Krakow when I was 18, when I started my, I was almost 20 when I started my studies, and I've been living there for the past 10 years, but basically all my film education, I mean, the beginning of it happened in that small town in the south of Poland.
So what's the population of this small town that has one theater?
Well, it's very tiny. It's like it's part of a larger town, but like I grew up in this sort of very small district, which is probably like 20,000 something like that. Yeah,
The reason I'm asking is because I've been into small villages in India, small villages of 3 million people. So that's just to put things into perspective. Okay. Yeah. And when people go to the movies in your small town, what type of movies play? Are they special Polish movies? Are they the big American movies? Or?
Well, back then, when the cinema was still operating, because now there is no cinema theater in that place. But back then there was this one theater that was playing basically only American movies. Like it was very difficult to see any kind of art house European films. Some of them came out on VHS, so that was like you could go that way. But if you wanted to see something in the theater, I remember that each time I wanted to watch like an European art film, I had to go like to this way, like an hour and a half by bus, one way, just to the city of Katowice, which was like the biggest city in the area, and I missed many days of school that way. That I just went to, but I had very understanding parents. They always let me, so that was great actually.
Speaking of school, you have just completed your dissertation in film. Your dissertation's on Pauline Kael, correct?
Right.
Let's give him a round of applause for that. We're all
Thank you.
Academics. Absolutely. Cool. And Wael, you're also, even though you're a veteran, this is your first time here in our panel. Tell us about Cairo, tiny town.
Yeah, tiny town. I'm from a small island on the Nile. It's called Zamalek, and it's like 20 minutes away from the pyramids and about 5 minutes away from Tahrir Square.
So Tahrir Square is where the heart of the revolution is
exactly.
taking place.
So it's pretty intense right now, and I've always watched movies, and I even studied movies I studied film at the American University in Cairo. And Egyptian cinema is probably the biggest film industry in the Arab world. So Egyptians in general are always interested in new movies and everything that's coming out in Egypt.
So usually when we think of the big film industries, we think of the American industry, we think of Hollywood, we think of Bollywood, even though we don't think of other Indian cinema. And then what we often forget is that there's this huge Egyptian cinema that's taking place.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. What are the movies usually about? Are they sort of like a Pulp Fiction type thing, or are they social issues? Or
like during the Mubarak era, we couldn't criticize the government or anything. So most of the movies were comedies and like it was more like escapism. But right now, like this year, we've seen a tremendous change in movies in Egypt. Like because everybody was suddenly liberated and there was no longer this the type of and not like there's still censorship in the sense of nudity and so on, but there's not censorship in terms of content. Like you can pretty much criticize anyone right now. So and you have a lot of independent filmmakers coming out like in the past year and so on.
So under the dictator, the best you were getting were comedies, and now people feel free to speak.
Yeah.
And so from your smile, I think you feel this is a great thing that's happening.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's
absolutely. Okay, very nice. Scott, you're from this island nation. Yeah, tell us about movies in your country. Do they have movies?
They do have movies. Yes, there are two types of movies. There are movies in which incredibly wealthy, incredibly posh people get terribly excited about issues that don't really matter to anybody else. And there are movies in which incredibly poor people cope with horrendous social deprivation by swearing at each other and stabbing each other. But other than that, we do have American movies. So I should point out, actually, I was introduced the other day as being from London, which is slightly erroneous in that I write for the Spectator magazine, which is based in London, which has two chief claims to fame. The first is that it's the oldest continually published magazine in the English language. And the second is that Roger Ebert once told me it was his favorite magazine in the world. Although I should point out that was before I was given any editorial responsibility over to it. So that situation may have changed.
Now I think he loves it more, right?
Yeah. I'm actually from a small town called Rugby, which is without question the most significant settlement in the history of the world, because it was where the sport of rugby was developed. And I know that the sport of rugby is huge here in America.
Rugby.
And that you all watch it constantly. So it's,
yeah, I think it has a ball or something like that. Yeah. Very nice. Okay. This is going to be a fun hour. All right. Pablo, why don't you tell us about what's happening in Brazil? Tell us about the movie life of Brazilians.
We actually, I always say that Brazil has one of the, and I'm sorry because I'm going to sound really arrogant right now, but one of the best.
Won't be the first time.
No, it won't, and or the last. One of the best cinematographies in the world, because we are such a big country. We have continental proportions, and we have movie makers all over the country. So when you see a film from São Paulo, a film from Rio, a film from the northeast region or the south region of Brazil, they look completely different from each other, thematically, visually. Their language are different. The visual language is different. So you can really say that's the same country that's producing all of those movies, and that really interests me as a filmmaker and a film critic and a film lover. I wish you could see all the films that we produce, because we are producing even more and more films each year. Of course, we produce a lot of crappy films because well, that happens. But we also have this year, for instance, we have a film which is a historical film called Xingu, which is based on real facts about an expedition to the central region of Brazil, and when we're dealing with the Indians. And we also have this really erotic, not pornography, it's not a porn film, but also we do that too, but it's not. which is called. It has a beautiful title. It's titled I would get the worst news from your beautiful lips, and which is a very intense story. But we also have this comedy called The Clown. So it's very different films from the same country, and that I'm really proud of that. But Brazilian films are not that watched by Brazilians. Unfortunately, they rather go see a blockbuster Hollywood film than go to a Brazilian film. And when they go to see a Brazilian film, most of people, they will say, oh, this one is good. We're finally producing something good. It's not because we finally are producing something good. It's because they never see anything. So, yeah. And now we are having the thing in Brazil that really, really bothers me. We always had subtitled movies. When we were watching foreign movies, they were subtitled. And now, more and more, they're dubbing the films. Yes, please, Brazilians that are watching this, you should hear their reactions. They all went, oh, no, that's gross.
Yeah. And it wasn't dubbed. Right.
Yeah, because it's awful, because they think they want to, tap in this market of people that don't like reading subtitles. But that's just destroying the film, because you're ruining the mixing. The actor's job, the guy spent like a year creating that character, that voice, and now you have this guy who's in 5 hours he dubs the whole thing, and that's what's happening now. And I'm trying to fight this, but a lot of people just say that I'm being, I don't want the films to become popular, that I'm an elitist guy. It's not. It's just that I love films. I want them to be preserved in their original form.
Okay, so they're being dubbed. What language are they originally in, and what language are they being dubbed into?
If they're not Portuguese, they are going to be dubbed into Portuguese. So any foreign films.
Also
well,
foreign
actually,
films
more American films, more Hollywood films, because the public that goes to an European film, they're more of. I don't want to say they're a more specific crowd, but they won't go to see an European dubbed film.
Okay.
So, but they will go see, G.I. Joe 2 dubbed.
Okay.
Because who cares?
Well, it might be
Yeah,
better.
who
That
cares,
movie
but-
might be better if it's dubbed, right?
Yeah. No, don't say that.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
sorry,
it will be even worse.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
Blasphemy.
the thing.
Okay.
So that's what's happening now, and really bothers me.
Okay. Understandably. Gerardo, you've told us a little bit about movie going in Mexico City. Tell me, do people in your little tiny town of Mexico City, do they go to movies daily, once a week, once a month? How much does a movie ticket cost compared to other things?
Well, now that you were talking about the 3 million people villages,
Yeah.
well, we're 20 million people, so
20
I think
million.
we got you beat.
You know.
And it's funny that Pablo mentions about the dubbing, because it's exactly the same thing that's happening in Mexico, exactly the same thing. It started with cartoons for kids, like the Disney movies, and now more and more they are all dubbed. And
The
for
cartoons
example,
are dubbed.
And for example, Hugo, I mean, there was a Martin Scorsese movie that you could only find dubbed. I still saw it though, but that's really frustrating. I, as the older member of the group this year, I come from the time when we had a different, the movie experience was different before than it is now. In the old days, every movie was like the Virginia. They had the large screens, they had a theme, for example, like there were some, like for example, with the paintings of the deer, there were some of the Chinese theme. They all had a theme like the Virginia, but not anymore. Before, for example, you had the movies that they would last in the big theaters with the big screen. There were no multiplexes. And they had like, they would last, a movie would last maybe 2 months, 3 months. Even I remember the Poseidon Adventure lasted maybe like a year and a half on the
Poseidon
on the
Adventure was
theater.
out for a year and a half. Yeah. And it just kept sinking and sinking and sinking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. And but there were also the movies, the ones that I really went to the most often, because there were 5 in our family, and for us to go to the movies that often, we went to with the ones that were also large, but they changed. They showed double or triple features, and for example, they had I remember that the big screens, they didn't have a stage like the Virginia, so they had like a big ramp with a carpet, and all the kids before the movie, they will start they will go climb and roll and that kind of thing. Fortunately, my parents never allowed us to do it because right now I would regret it. And the movies weren't the condition of the theaters wasn't all that great. I remember there was one theater that had leaks, and when it started to rain, anybody opened their umbrella like in a baseball game. I'm not kidding you about that.
So did the theater leak during Poseidon Adventure? That would have been.
It was 4D. That was 4D for
that
that.
was 4D, yeah.
Yes.
3D,
yes.
4D, yeah.
And the floors had the sticky floors, and I remember if you wanted to go to the restroom, you had to go with an adult because you never knew what was gonna be happening there. And you also had the balconies, the same thing. You couldn't go to the balconies because, who knew what was going over there?
Yeah, just like the Virginia balcony, right? Yeah, who knows what's happening?
That's a
there.
very fun theater to go.
What's interesting?
I remember when I was a kid, there was one time from the balcony, a kid fell. I saw him in the corner of my eye, and only the heat from falling stopped from his screaming.
Oh no!
Really, I'm not kidding you about that.
Oh.
But you got to see 2 movies, 3 movies. Okay. Most of them were pretty bad, actually. They changed the movies most every day. And now these days, the same thing is happening as it is in the United States. Those movies, for example, The Balcony, later on in the 90s, the balconies, they turned them into separate movies with a different screen. And now they just tone them down, and they are all, like here in the United States, the multiplexes. But it's not the same thing.
You don't have people falling from the theater. You don't.
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
Our theaters were like the Cinema Paradiso. They had the characters. They were the same people you saw every day. Some of them a little bit not completely in their in their faculties, in their head faculties.
Sure.
But it was different. Now you go to the movies and they're very nice. They're very clean. The popcorn is great. Before you had the big sacks of plastic. I remember there was a room in the theaters with a big sack of popcorn in a bag, and that's what they sold you. Now you have the fresh popcorn and everything, but
you miss those days of the slime and grease.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it gave you flavor. Yeah.
But the funny thing is that my wife and I hardly ever buy popcorn, but the last time we did, the commercials were so long that we finished the whole bucket of before the movie started.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Very nice.
But they're destroying the old theaters.
Are they destroying those
Yeah,
theaters?
absolutely gone. I remember there was one that had like the Greco-Roman statues. They were all, some of them fell on the earthquake, on the 1985 earthquake. Many of them fell.
Okay, so during the earthquake,
now,
a lot of those.
Because
things
in
fell.
Brazil, a lot of the old theaters are being converted to evangelical churches.
One of mine too.
Yeah.
One of the ones I went as a child to.
I mean, it's one type of temple switched to a different type of temple. Yeah, very nice. Okay. Krishna. Tell us about movie going. Now, are you living in Dubai these days, or are you living in India?
I live in Bangalore, in India.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what's happening there is, as you all know, India has like a huge market for movies. They're producing like I think 3 times what Hollywood's
least.
producing. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's
we
just
have like
Hollywood,
10 different
yeah.
languages.
Yeah.
And but there is a market for Hollywood right now, where a lot of blockbusters are being released, and they have a lot of 3D movies now.
3D movies in India.
There's a lot of 3D.
Are these 3D Indian movies?
Oh no, 3D.
'Cause I like
there's
to
only
see
been
Shah Rukh
like
Khan in 3D.
yeah, there were 2 Shah Rukh Khan movies in 3D last year, and they were both converted, and the conversion was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So the thing is, now everything is going to 3D, and you're not having the 2D option anymore to watch the movie in 2D. Like John Carter, if I had to see, I either could see it in English in 3D or in Hindi in 2D. That was the options for me. So
Did you watch it in Hindi, or did you watch John Carter in English?
I watched it in English.
English. Oh, I'd like to see it in Hindi.
Yeah,
Like,
I like to see it in Hindi too, but dubbed. The thing is, you know how attendance has been going down in Hollywood, the theater attendance? It's actually going up in Hollywood. I mean Bollywood, sorry. I don't get how that's working out, but 2011 was a better year than 2010 or 2009. And the highest grossing movie, it keeps changing every year. As in every year there are like 2 or 3 movies that break each other's records. So I don't know how that's happening. Is the attendance going up, or is the ticket prices increasing? I'm not sure. But movies are doing much better in India now. And we have a lot of Hollywood movies doing well. Like Tintin, I think it bombed here. I'm not sure.
Tintin, how did it do over here?
Did anyone watch Tintin here? The
We're here
Adventures
seeing
of
Tintin.
Yeah,
Only a
but
few
in
people-
India,
okay, we'll see
in
what-
5 days, it became the highest-grossing animated movie ever released there,
Really?
and it became the highest-grossing Spielberg movie ever released in India.
Really?
Yeah, because Tintin has a huge market in India.
Wow.
So, and Hugo hasn't released yet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all kinds of things are happening in India.
Okay.
And the nice thing is they started releasing small movies like The Artist in theaters.
Are people watching movies like The Artist?
I went for The Artist and it was half full.
Mm.
It was more full than John Carter, which was awesome. So.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good example, but yeah, okay.
Okay, how many people watched John Carter? I just
So
want
here's
to know.
John Carter.
Did you
3
guys like
people
it?
have admitted to watching John Carter. Yeah.
Did you see it?
I have not seen John Carter. Yeah.
I saw it. I kind of liked it.
It was really cool, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Olivia, why don't you tell us about Montreal? What is life like in terms of movie going?
Weird.
Yes, it's Canada. Of course, it's weird. Anyway.
Yeah, we're the weird neighbors to the north. Well, I mean, what I really like about being in Montreal is that we get exposed to a lot of French Canadian cinema, and it's an experience that can't be narrowed down to one thing. There are so many ways to consume cinema. You have the dubbed option, which a lot of people go for, and it's basically Hollywood movies being dubbed in French, and I have a great distaste for it as well because French, like Spanish and Portuguese, is a Latin language, which means an English sentence that's short like this is long like that in French, and so there's no chance for the voice actors, to express anything at all. They're just reciting the lines. It's absolutely awful. Why anyone wants to see the French dubbed version of any Hollywood movie, I'll never know. Then,
What about was The Artist dubbed into French?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a market for that. Although I think The Artist, like a lot of other movies that are either French or foreign or made in Quebec and otherwise French speaking, was probably shown at a really, really great theater called the Excentrice. So it's sort of like eccentric, but with an S at the end. And when it first opened, something like 12 years ago, it felt like the future of cinema. They didn't even have a concession stand, which actually is great, because then you're not walking into a really dirty theater. They had teeny little rooms, but a nice big screen for the handful of people that could fit into each theater. When you went to the teller, they were behind this screen that was actually projecting an image of the teller, and it was really weird. And it was the cinema was this brand new building, and in Montreal, it's a lot of old buildings, so a new building always attracts a lot of attention and a lot of protests. And this one, this theater was built by some guy with a lot of money who does nothing but spend money on the arts in Montreal. Wouldn't that be nice, eh? And he got this really weird architect to build this theater, and all he wanted was he wanted a place where people could go see some serious art films. Nothing is ever dubbed. If it's foreign, it's subtitled, and very few Hollywood pictures make it here, obviously. But that's really because they have a place elsewhere at other theaters, and he doesn't really need to dip into that market at all.
And he has people coming to the theater.
Oh, absolutely. At some point, he tried to transition it into more of a performance art center, and that flopped, so he just went back to movies. And, yeah.
And the other day, you were also mentioning something about this rise of interactive cinema. What does that even mean?
Well, it means a lot of things. It's something that I had the opportunity to be introduced to at a local film festival that sort of showcases everything, almost everything that was made in Quebec in the last year.
Which is how many movies? Like one movie or what?
Oh, well, like in terms of interactive movies?
Any.
Oh, well, the festival itself showcased 300 movies. And apparently it was pared down from like 500. So in 1 year, 500 movies in Quebec alone were made. In terms of interactive movies, they showed something like 4 or 5. It's really an emerging category, and it means a lot of things. There's usually an internet component, but if I use one for example, and you can go to the website, it's called barcode.tv, and what it was developed as an app, a smartphone app, so you would scan the barcode of, I don't know, anything, you know, packet of gum, coffee, whatever. You scan the barcode on your phone, and the program on the website will recognize it, and it will launch a little movie that's related to that product. And it's a short, you know, 1 or 2 minute movie. It's made by, there were 100 movies in all, made by 30 filmmakers coming from Germany, France, and Quebec. And and the nice thing is that the database is constantly growing. So if it can't find your product, you can enter it and say, oh, this is a packet of gum, and it should go under food. And there'll be X number of movies under food, and so it could really launch any one of those movies at all. So even though the project is over, they're no longer making movies, the website is still there, and the database is still growing. And they're really actually very interesting short movies, and you know, it's the kind of thing you could kind of get stuck in a loop watching the movies.
So it's almost like a choose your own adventure type.
Yeah, except with movies that make no sense, you know, with regards to one another. Yeah.
I have an idea. This is you can suggest this to your people in Montreal. Like if you add some sort of a controller with buttons, and then have like a first-person shooter type thing. Like in America, like in English, we call those video games, but in French, you can call them interactive.
In French, we call it cinema.
Yeah. Good. Grace, coming from a distant part of Canada, Toronto. Actually, you also, around this time last year.
I thought we agree. I'm just going to sit here and drink my coffee.
Yeah, Grace's rules for being on the panel was that she was going to sit and drink coffee. But while you're doing that, around this time last year, you were traveling extensively through China. Can you tell us about movie going in China?
Yeah, last year around this time I was a little bit late to the festival, and I actually missed the panel last year because I was on a trip to China, and I was working for the Toronto International Film Festival, and so we went to the Beijing International Film Festival, which was the first year, and the Hong Kong Film Festival, and it was a great experience. I really learned a lot about the Chinese cinema scene, in particular the Chinese documentaries, which is a really emerging upcoming scene. There's a lot of really exciting work being made, and a lot of them actually are not being very well known in China at all, because most of the documentaries are being shown in international festivals. So within China, there's actually not really much venue for those exciting works to be known. So it was really valuable experience just getting to know the Chinese documentaries and meeting the filmmakers.
Did you get a sense of the topics? Were there any repeated topics or sentiment in these movies? Any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of the documentaries are driven by social issues, mostly because of the climate in China, and also it coincides with the recent rise in technology where, 10 years ago, no one can really just pick up a camera and record their life around them, and now they can, with an access to a simple camera recorder. So a lot of the documentary are not so much aesthetics driven as so much driven by content and just a desire to record the life around you. And mostly it's sort of a very guerrilla style. The documentary filmmaker would pick up the camera and they would shoot, they would edit, they would, submit it to festivals where they would just have a record of their life, and some of them are quite long, but it's a really interesting and realistic look at the life in China today. And I feel it's one of the ways for people to really get to know what China is like is through these documentaries. Because when you go on a trip, you go to Beijing, Shanghai, and Xi'an, you hit the 3 big cities, and then you come back and you say, I've been to China, and that's not China.
So you said these documentaries aren't getting much viewing in China because of the lack of venues, meaning they don't have the theaters, or just the audience isn't interested, or what do you think?
Yeah, there is no commercial distribution of documentaries in China. As far as I know right now, I think that is changing recently. There are some documentary filmmakers who are trying very hard to get those venues open, but as when I was there last year, there was no, the movie theaters are showing big blockbusters. So
American blockbusters or Chinese?
Both.
Okay.
There's a lot of Hong Kong movies being shown, just a lot of Chinese blockbuster being shown, and with multi-million-dollar budgets. I think Avatar did really well in China, and 3D is a big thing, but small documentary, there's no art house theaters, that's the big difference. So they really don't have any venue, and they can have private showings in galleries or coffee shops, but they can't charge, because as soon as they charge, it becomes a public showing. And then they will have to go through censorship, which is another way, another blockade that you have to go through it before your film can be shown commercially in China.
So that's very interesting. So it's almost like a coffee shop experience, but
yeah, but very limited, right? You can only advertise through word of mouth. You can't charge people anything. So when you're making it for nothing, you are not even allowed to get back what you're putting into it. Yeah.
Very nice. Scott, you're mentioning the other day to me about changes in film criticism. Tell us about this.
Well, actually, there's something that I notice happening in Britain, and I think it perhaps happens here, but I'm not as sure. And I notice it from the smallest blog to the biggest newspaper, which is that there's a dismaying trend towards many working film critics thinking that the highest aim of their job is to say the funniest thing they can say about a film that it's not worth them writing about or anybody watching. Films have always, one of the joys of film criticism, we all love reading Roger Ebert's Your Movie Sucks books. We all love reading, because a film critic like Roger Ebert sees every film. And so when you see every film, you're going to see bad films. And when you see bad films, the most entertainment that your audience can get out of those films is perhaps by reading Roger Ebert's incredibly funny review of an incredibly bad film. But I notice more and more in Britain that people are seeking out not deliberately bad films, not the Troll 2s, the Plan 9 from Outer Spaces that are these weird, awful experiences that are wonderful in their own right, but simply mediocre films, and they try to get a stand-up comedy routine into their review, ripping into it, rather than, and these of course are people, particularly if they're running blogs, these are people who have a choice of which films they review, which is the important thing. And these people are choosing to review mediocre films in a very snarky, trying to be funny way, rather than finding good movies and movies that move them, and trying to write persuasively enough that other people who haven't heard of those films want to go out and see them, which I think is the highest aim of film criticism. I mean, there are people out there... There are people out there who think that film criticism is about criticizing as much as possible, and it isn't. It is about finding the best films, the films that reward you, and helping them to reward other people.
So you're saying rather than the film critic calling your attention to this gem that everyone should appreciate, it's more become this narcissistic chance to just...
Yes, I mean, I don't want to paint the picture that is prevalent, but it is, that is dominant, but it is prevalent. It is a trend and I notice people trying to break it. Sometimes I get emails from people either interested in writing directly for a publication that I'm editing, or just talking about film criticism in general and asking for advice. And they will, rather than sort of saying, "Oh, I love film," or "I'm really interested in this," or "I was moved by such and such, and that's what made me interested in film," they'll say something like, I think I have quite a snarky sense of humor, so I think I'd make a good film critic." And to me, that is that's an immediate red flag. That's I'm not interested in that. I love when a film critic like Roger Ebert writes a review of a dreadful film and tears into it because it's necessary, but I'm not interested at all in young critics who are trying to make their way into film criticism, thinking that is the highest aim of what they purport is their chosen career.
Very, very, very important point.
That isn't just happening in UK. You can see it all over the world, like everywhere. Even in India, that's happening. Where they try to come up with this funny one-liner, and then they put that in quotes somewhere on websites and stuff. Or you can go to Rotten Tomatoes and look at, the blurb. They always pick that one bad sentence saying blah 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 is a rip-off of blah blah blah.
I mean, there's one trend that and this is the editor in me coming out. But there's one thing that I absolutely hate is that I've been sent so many reviews where people say things like, "I would rather rip my arm off and poke myself in the eye with the finger at the end of it than watch this movie again." And I think, no, you wouldn't. What you mean is you don't think this film is terribly good. So why not say that?
Very wonderful point. Excuse me, Michal.
Right.
You've also traveled extensively for film festivals. Tell us about the festivals you visited and what do you see in terms
Around
of
the world, right? Or
Poland we can
Poland.
start with, but anywhere else?
okay, well, just one comment on what Pablo and Gerardo were saying, because it just made me realize what a strange country I'm coming from, actually. The dubbing question. Well, all of the movies in Poland, when they play in the theaters, are actually subtitled, and I think that, well, there will be a small rebellion if that was changed, but the movies that are playing on television, they have something even more, I would say, abrasive than dubbing, which is, in Polish is called lektor, which is basically one guy reading all the lines. Sort of like it's superimposed over the original soundtrack. So we can hear sort of faintly the original soundtrack and you have one guy reading all the lines. So you can imagine a scene from a movie, I don't know, a romantic movie like Gone with the Wind, and this one guy sort of dispassionately delivering all the beautiful lines. So that's even more extreme.
Does he have a nice voice, at least?
Well, I mean, yeah, they do they do select them to have the nice voices, but it's still so obtrusive. And this is why DVD sort of comes in handy, because you can just switch off the Polish voice and enjoy the originals. But as far as the festivals, well, I'm involved in one that takes place in Krakow. It's called Off Plus Camera. It actually ended this Sunday, so I sort of immediately after it ended packed my stuff and came here. And this is a festival that is devoted mostly to independent cinema, and it actually, thanks to very generous funding from the City Council of Krakow, it has one of the largest financial awards for first and second features in the main competition, which is $100,000 for the winning feature. And this was the fifth edition of the festival. I was involved in the first one and this year as well. And I have to say that probably it's one of the most interesting festivals that is currently available in Poland. But Polish people are starved for movies. I mean, there's this tremendous popularity of both like blockbusters and of art house cinema. I would say that especially thanks to cheap DVDs and like, I don't know if that exists here as well, but like inserts to magazines, like movies on DVDs that are being inserted to a magazine when you buy them.
So here we might have perfume and cologne strips. And, there you have movies.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I mean sometimes cologne is as well, but it's basically movies, and it's very, very interesting because people are so sort of like, for many years they were so famished for good cinema that right now you have those strange, funny situations when you buy a magazine like Glamour or Cosmopolitan, and you have this very, very well arty film inserted. I remember this one Glamour issue of Glamour magazine that had David Lynch's Inland Empire inserted. So you buy this very fluffy magazine and you get a very serious movie with it. And also, and this is something that probably, I don't know if you're even allowed to mention, but well, downloading is huge in all of the Eastern Europe, because basically I think there's still this inequality in terms of when movies are released, because in a way we are all part of a global village right now, so we keep reading about the movies that are being released in the States, but they usually open much later in the whole of the former Eastern Bloc. So there's also this sort of darker side of the internet, that people are so eager to see them that many of them are willing to download them before the original release.
Actually, let's ask this question. Going through the whole group one by one, a first run movie on the first night, how much does it cost in your currency, and then translate that into American dollars? So Michal, first run movie, whether it's an American movie.
You mean how much the ticket is?
How much does the ticket cost?
The ticket, okay. Depending on the city. In the big city like Warsaw and Krakow, it's around 25 zlotys, which is a lot for a Polish person to pay, but it's like in dollars, it's something probably like $8.
$8.
But it's still it's expensive for.
This is very, very expensive.
Yeah. So, but in smaller cities, it's lesser than that. But it's still a significant sort of, especially if one wants to take their family and like kids, it's still a significant amount of money to pay. I mean, keeping in mind how much people are making in Poland.
Okay, Khairy.
It depends if it's 2D or 3D, but it's between $4 and $8
More than $8, and then is that expensive? Is that cheap?
No, it's cheap, but like because like 40% of the Egyptian population is live below the poverty line, so it has to be cheap. Otherwise, nobody would go.
Okay. Krishna.
At most, it would be $4 or something.
$4.
That's in the multiplexes and in 3D. So.
Okay. $4. Okay.
Well, I feel like my answer should be the previous three answers put together. My experience of certainly of multiplex cinemas is that tickets seem to be getting increasingly expensive, almost prohibitively expensive. That's just my suggestion. Obviously, I don't have any figures to say that people are that figures are going down because of it. Attendance are going down because of it. But a family of two, a family of three, particularly if they're interested in popcorn and Coca-Cola while they're going, can spend £25, which can be sort of $40 going to the cinema, which I think is extraordinary. Now, that isn't the case everywhere, but there are, particularly if you're going to see a 3D movie, there are cases where that happens. And I'm convinced it is self-defeating. I'm sure there are some economists who could explain to me why it isn't, but I'm convinced that I've known people who will say, shall we go and see X at the cinema? And they'll say, I'll wait till it comes out on DVD, it'll be cheaper. And that makes me very sad indeed.
One more thing is, in India, at least where I come from, everything's releasing in 3D, and you need to buy the glasses each time. You can't bring your glasses back.
How much do the glasses cost?
Same in Egypt.
It's about $1 or something.
Okay.
But the point is, it's a fourth of the price, and you're buying it again and again. So at least that's in Dubai. Actually, you need to buy the glasses.
Okay.
In India, you're using glasses.
Okay.
I mean, you're taking it from them and giving it back to them.
Okay.
But because of that, there are scratches and the quality is bad.
Sure. Olivia, how much does a movie cost? First run, first day.
Well, at a multiplex, and I mean, first run, been there for 5 weeks. It doesn't matter; it's the same price.
Okay.
It'll be between $12 and $16, depending on if it's if you're seeing it on the IMAX screen, if it's in 3D. And the Canadian dollar is worth just a little more than the US dollar, so it's about the same price in US dollars.
So $12.
She's bragging. Did you realize that?
Yeah. Canadians are jealous of America, right? Okay, Gerardo.
No, in Mexico we're talking about $4 or $5, 60 pesos. But the funny thing is that as of late, the one thing that's the new fad is that you go to VIP movies.
What does that
and
mean?
They are cinemas that are nicer. They got the lazy boy recliners, and you got a waiter that brings you sushi and that kind of thing.
Really? Okay.
And that costs about twice as much. And of course, if you buy the food, it's also much more.
So at these VIP theaters where you have the recliners, you also have the boy falling out of the balcony.
Not anymore.
I shouldn't make jokes about that. Okay, good.
Incidentally, those waterfall theaters, we don't have any of them in Canada. The only place I went to that was like that was somewhere in America. So America rocks.
Very nice. Grace, did you get a sense in China of the prices of theaters? Did you get a chance for that? Or?
Yeah, in China it's actually quite expensive, surprisingly. At least the one movie, a horrible Chinese blockbuster movie I went to in Beijing, in the very downtown upscale sort of shopping district, it was 150 yuan, Chinese dollars, which is converted to I think about $15 to $16 US.
Wow,
per person.
And then again, is that expensive there?
That is really expensive because, especially that's really a middle class income that you can afford to go to that movie. If you're a migrant worker or a day laborer, there's no way you can afford that kind. Because that's sort of almost, I think a monthly salary will be a couple $100 for some of those people. In Toronto, the exotic place that I come from, we don't have the 4D Poseidon adventures, but it's basically North American prices. It's about anytime between $10 and $15 for a movie.
$10 to $15. Okay. Pablo, how about Brazil?
Well, it depends on the city. São Paulo, for instance, it's a very expensive city to live, and it doesn't matter if it's a first-run movie or if it's being shown for 5-6 weeks. In São Paulo, it could get to $12, maybe $14. It's a very expensive city, and they do have in São Paulo one or two of those very VIP theaters with the lazy boy. I call them asshole theaters because come on, you're not there to see a movie. You're just there to show, oh, I'm so rich that I can have a waiter during the movie.
Well, you know what they do to you
We actually,
sometimes
at my local cinema, we actually have we have one deluxe screen. When they give you a slightly larger ticket, so when you walk in, you can show everybody that you're going to the deluxe
Really?
screen.
I'm afraid to ask, do you have a name for those movies? Or?
The problem is that sometimes they don't tell you about. They don't tell you that that movie that you're going to is showing in those kind of theaters. So you get there, and the one movie you wanted to see, that's all. That's your only choice to. The only kind of place you can see it.
But in Brazil, it's that I'm going to that theater because I can afford it. You know, it's anyway. But in other cities, it's like $6-8. But now it's my turn to brag, because our economy is very, very strong for the last. It's been strong for the past few years. So the middle class in Brazil is really growing. A lot of people are going from poor to middle class, and that's one of the reasons they give to explain why there are so many dubbed films right now. Because poor people, they don't read, so now they're middle class. They're going to the movies, so it has to be dubbed. That's a lie. That is a lie, because I've seen people that I could tell that they are not used to go to the movies, and they wanted to see a subtitled film. And I've seen a lot of rich people, and that they go, oh, dubbed's much better because I don't have to read. And so that's a lie. It's not the problem. It's not people coming to middle class and wanted dubbed films. That's prejudice, unfortunately. But about $8. What I've been seeing, I don't know if you have noticed this in your countries, is that the audience is getting much more. They talk through the whole film.
They text.
What about
text? You have to see the lights on the iPhones.
Actually, in Montreal, they're very disciplined about that. And if anybody has their cell phone, if anybody's talking, they are seriously judged and reprimanded, told to shut up. You wouldn't expect that behavior at the multiplex because that's where all the teenagers go. But I'm actually really surprised at how well-behaved people are and how seriously punished people are if their phones turn on and whatever. Yeah.
In Brazil, if you go to the film during the afternoon, it's hell, because they're talking all the time. They're commenting on the film. I remember this one time.
Yeah, sure.
I was. It was a long time ago. I was watching Castaway, so it's 2000, 2001. Yeah. And there was two old ladies behind me, and one of them was the worst kind of moviegoer, which is the narrator. And she was behind me, and she was going. The other one, her name was Nana. I never forgot her name. Because everything that happened, she goes, "Oh, look, Nana, he's going to a plane." "Oh, look, Nana, the plane crashed." "Oh, look, Nana, he's friends with the volleyball." And I didn't want to say anything because they were really old and sweet. But at some point, I was just, and then I get, "Oh, lady, please, would you just stay quiet? We're watching a film." And 2 seconds went by, and she goes, "Oh, Nana, that guy's really pissed at us." So I think it was a condition of her. She has to narrate everything that happens in her life. I don't know.
Right. Well, do people, what is the behavior of the audience goers? Like, for example, in Poland, are people very quiet? Do people talk to the movie? Do people talk to Pablo?
I would say people are pretty disciplined. I mean, but still, I mean, some stuff is frowned upon. I mean, depending on where you go, right? I mean, there are theaters like art theaters that don't sell popcorn sort of on principle. Like, they make a statement that, this is like art. You should just, take it in. And but if you go to a multiplex, depending on your luck, I mean, I've been through those situations that Pablo just described as well. I mean, there's no general pattern, I would say.
Cairo?
Egyptians tend to be loud people, so it's more of an interactive experience.
It is an interactive movie, and then that's spread into Canada with their interaction.
Yeah, exactly, and they actually yell at the screen sometimes. But that's not the only problem. Like, another problem is we're probably the only country in the world where we have intermission breaks.
Intermission breaks?
Yeah, really? You have intermission breaks. And
the film is short, like
even a 1.5 hour long movie has an intermission.
Yeah, and it's in Egypt. it's not even like at the middle of the film. It's like the projection is like he has this weird sense of humor. Like
He just cuts it somewhere, right?
yeah, and it's at the most intense part. It's like it's like Luke, I am your father. Intermission.
Okay. So that must be why they yell at the theater, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm slightly concerned that you've said that now, because I know this is being watched by some people in Britain, and considering the amount of money that they try to bilk out of cinema goers in Britain, I'm concerned that they'll start doing that now and charging you extra to get back in to see what happens at the end.
Yeah. Very nice. Okay. Very, very interesting. Any other thoughts? Do people? You said people in Montreal are very quiet. Grace, did you notice anything in China? Were people very quiet in terms of the theaters there?
Oh yeah, that reminds me. No, it's a riot. It's a party in China when you watch a movie. There's people talking. It's actually custom to talk on the phone in the movie theater.
It's a custom to talk on the phone in
You know,
the movie.
well, people take calls. Like I think everyone around me took at least one call during the movie.
Really?
Yeah, there's texting going on. It's what I get. Yeah, so it's definitely not something I was used to. And I actually went and saw a movie with Shelley Kreiser, one of the premium film critic who lives in Beijing, and I was about to say something the first time this happened, like in Chinese. I was like, oh yeah, I speak Mandarin. I'm gonna tell them it's not appropriate. And he's like, no, this is the way it is. You really shouldn't bother. So, and then people walking in and out, and they take breaks. They come back in. They bring food. It's a party atmosphere.
So it's very, very casual, very informal.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah.
In Mexico, the worst thing that can happen to you is going to the movies and having a big bunch of schoolmates coming from school, because I mean you're in trouble when you see that. And also the problem is that when you go to the really nice theaters, the really expensive ones, you'll get there's some crime in Mexico, so you get many kids, the rich kids, they may have like bodyguards, and even though you're going to the theater and you have a sign that says the bodyguard also has to pay his own ticket.
Really?
and of course, if they are the kids, for example, when I went to see Avatar, I couldn't enjoy the movie at all because there were like a group of 10 kids with a bodyguard, and you cannot tell, if you tell a kid with a bodyguard to shut up, he's not going to listen to you.
Wow, that's actually kind of frightening.
I must say that generally I find that audiences in England are fairly well behaved. There's one sort of slight difference, though, is that we're having quite popular at the moment. I've noticed are revival screenings of musicals. We have sing-along screenings, which I understand they have as a Sound of Music and those kind of movies. Unfortunately, we also have just general re-releases of classic films, and some people can't quite tell the difference between a re-release of a classic musical and a sing-along screening of a classic musical. I actually went with a friend of mine who, her favorite movie is Grease, and I said, well, let's go and see it. It was re-released at the cinema. I said, let's go and see it. And there were 4 people in the cinema. We were the first to sit down. One other came in and sat at the back, which is very British, very polite, sit as far away from the other people as possible. And the final gentleman came in and sat immediately behind us. I'm not quite sure why. And then he'd obviously in his mind, he'd cast himself in some role in Grease. And during Summer Loving, he began to sing along. And it was a performance he kept up throughout the movie. But what was fascinating to me was that he didn't sing the lyrics. He merely sang the backing vocals. So that throughout Summer Loving, he merely sang da-da-dum, like does he have a car? Mm-hmm. Aha, aha, aha. Now, I don't know what it says about a person that they sing along with a movie in the first place. I certainly don't know what it says about the self-esteem of somebody who goes to a film and then casts themselves as a backing vocalist.
Well, he's obviously very modest. Okay, I have a few more questions to ask our correspondents. But if anyone has questions, we'll start taking questions. Please line up behind the microphone. Michal, you mentioned this trend of people downloading movies. And then people watching these movies from DVDs. Is it just because it's convenient, or is it because movies are too difficult to experience? What do you think is motivating?
You mean downloading or the
Either
DVD?
one.
Either one. Well, I mean, still, I think that we're all in a very interesting moment, sort of like there's a new model emerging, I think, because, obviously, as I said, like there's this global conversation about film going on all the time, right? And the moment that the movie opens in the States, is the moment that everyone reads about it and everyone wants to see it, and there are still some remnants of this sort of, let's say, like colonial thinking that, you know, like movies open first in the States and then like many months afterwards. Like for example, the Three Stooges movie will open in Poland, I think 4 months from now.
Oh.
So like those gaps when I was like 10 didn't seem that long, right? I mean, okay, 4 months, I can wait 4 months. There was no internet, there was no like this sense of time being you know, very compact. So now, yeah, I mean, many people do that, and I really sort of, I look forward to the day that there will be like a different model of distribution, that, I don't know, a film will open online globally, like for some small fee. That I think that will be like an optimal solution, because right now, the situation right now is sort of creates incentives for illegal downloaders, which I think is sad. But and as far as the DVD is concerned, I think that Poland has a very dynamic DVD market, and there are lots of stuff is released that wasn't available, like for example before 1989 when the communism fell, and people really want to watch good movies. It's just that I think that the market has to sort of, you know, catch up with that need.
Yeah, you put it really. You described it really well. That it's creating incentives for people to the way movies are being distributed are actually creating incentives for people to download or use these inappropriate officially means. Very nice point. Yeah. Wael, what about in Egypt?
Yeah, downloading is big in Egypt.
Downloading is really huge. And is it just is it the same thing? They don't want to wait, or?
No, it's more of watching the movie uncut, uncensored.
Okay. So rather than watch a censored movie, you can see the actual film.
Yeah, the actual film, and adding to what Scott said about the different types of criticism. In Egypt, you have to, like when I write reviews on print, like the ones that get published, I have to write the reviews based on the censored version of the movie. So I have to watch the uncensored version and then the censored version. But online, I get total freedom to actually write the actual review that I like. So even if a movie is great, I might give it a bad review because it's like the new American Pie movie is literally 45 minutes in Egypt.
American Pie is 45 minutes.
Could you get in trouble for reviewing an uncensored version, because that proves that you've seen the uncensored version?
No, it's not that. Like back a few years back during the Mubarak era, we a lot of film critics would get into jail for
really?
Yeah, but now it's totally different. Like everybody's, it's the people are encouraging people to criticize the government and so on. So.
But those are very two different reasons for downloading a film. I could support downloading a film to watch the uncensored version, but people who I can't wait to see a film, that they're just spoiled. You know. That's completely different, but that's a political statement, you know. I will watch the uncensored version.
Yeah, and we don't have like big HMV stores where you can buy DVDs. You have to import them. So, and the only people who buy DVDs are those who like watching the special features and the commentaries and so on.
Right. Very nice. Let's open it up now for questions. And if I may ask, just set up lightness, try to keep your question concise if possible, but fire away.
Sure. I have a specific question and a very general question. One of my favorite movies from 2010 or 11, depending on how you qualify that, was Incendie from Quebec. I was just curious as how was that film received in Quebec, and with some of its critical success in the U.S. with its Academy Award nomination, et cetera. Do you feel that will open anything up for French-speaking Canadian filmmakers for U.S. films?
Actually, of the, I think, 6 movies, Canadian movies, that were nominated for an Oscar in the foreign category in the history of the Oscars, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 that came from Quebec, that were made in Quebec. And I would say that since 2002, and while this is not something that's felt elsewhere, since about 2002, the Quebec film industry has been very successful domestically, and more people in Quebec go out to see a Quebec-made movie than Hollywood movies, dubbed or whatever. S&D was really well received domestically, and obviously people were really proud of the fact that it had been recognized internationally. But it also kind of, because this year's movie that was nominated was Mr. Lazar, and people started to, because Quebecers like to poke fun at just about anyone, they started to poke fun at the fact that, you know, to get recognized you had to make, you know, a movie that had something to do with the Middle East. And it's true, there's been that trend. Like, I don't know what the fascination is, well, maybe I do, but you know, there's that fascination that's really informing cinema in Quebec right now. But maybe now that they've poked fun at it, maybe they're going to focus on something else.
And then just really quickly, how did all of you become involved with the festival or writing on Roger Ebert's blog? Thanks.
Really quickly, let's start with the new people. Michal, how'd you get pulled into the blog, the Ebert blog?
Well, I've been publishing stuff in English on movies for a couple of years now, and my former editor at Fandor, Kevin Lee, who's either here or he just left, he recommended me for the site, so that's how I could join.
Yeah, Wael?
Through Roger's blog, like I used to comment a lot on his blog, and then he checked out my blog and asked me to be part of the foreign corresponding group.
Scott?
It's the same thing. Yeah,
Oh,
he
Krishna,
saw my
go ahead.
movies and he saw my movies and he saw my blog.
You saw your movie, you saw your blog. Scott?
Well, I have a slightly longer story, sorry, but the first time that I was ever left alone with an internet connection as a young man, no, sorry, it's clean, I assure you, I'm English. I was supposed to be doing research for my upcoming examinations, and actually the first thing I typed in was Siskel Ebert favorite movies, because I've always heard about Roger Ebert, but we had very little access to him, so the internet was a huge thing, obviously, for me. And then about 10 years later, I was obviously reading Roger Ebert's blog, I was following him on Twitter, and I started writing a small movie blog of my own, and this was before I became a professional critic. And I think actually it was you, Omer, and Wael, who recommended to Roger Ebert that he take a look at my blog, and he sort of very graciously and generously asked me to contribute to his site, and I'm very happy to do so.
Fantastic. Olivia?
We met on Twitter, and it just sort of blossomed from there.
Twitter, nice. Gerardo?
They showed the Siskel and Ebert show in Mexico for a few years, and they had an episode about the obligatory scenes and the cliches, and I really liked that. And I started sending Roger my suggestions, and for the last 12 years he has published them on his yearbooks. And when the FFC came along, he thought it would be a good idea to have a correspondent in Mexico.
Very nice. Grace, how did you get pulled in?
Through a comment on his blog, which led to emails and led to writing for the site.
Through his blog. Pablo?
Well, I've been a film critic for 18 years now, and I published some translations of one of my articles on Movie City News, which is edited by David Boland, and it was Roman Polanski's Frantic. And one day I was at home, and suddenly the tweet comes, and it's Roger recommending this my piece. I went crazy because he was always a huge influence on me, and I wrote him to thank for, because he's a extremely generous man. You have no idea. I mean, he doesn't need to do anything that he does because he's this god among men. But he's always, trying to present you, to introduce you to new people. So I wrote him to thank, and evolved from that.
Okay, very nice. Yes, sir.
Hi, I have a question about the responsibility of the audience, particularly when it comes to demanding better dubbing, more clearer subtitling of films. I happened to see Purple Rain in France that was dubbed in French. Whoa. It was like all the attitude was just sucked out of the film totally. And I kept thinking, there's people in France who think they saw Purple Rain, but they really didn't. And it seems like the audience really has some responsibility for saying, we will not stand for films that are either poorly subtitled or poorly dubbed, and I'm just curious as to where the audience comes into that particular conversation.
In Brazil, that's because in Europe it's very common to dub films. So in Brazil, when we are trying to have this conversation saying don't dub films, they go, but in Europe they do this all the time, like, oh, it's in Europe, oh, it's all we have to. They are right, of course, because it's Europe. No. European people make mistakes too.
Yes, well,
And it's, I don't know if it's a political thing, you know, an anti-American thing. I don't know what it is. But in Brazil, instead of educating the audience how wrong it is to dub a film because you're destroying the original art, they're interested in the market of this stuff. It's when they were releasing DVD films in the full screen,
Pan and scan.
Pan and scan, because people think that that's the way you should see on a square television set. Instead of educating the audience and say, no, you're destroying the film, they just release the films in the pan scan format. It's the same thing now. The audience has a very, very important role in, you know, informing how a film should be released. But we should educate them, and they don't do that. It's the film critic job to educate the audience and to point out to them that this is a mutilation of the original.
Well, I'm actually very lucky in that I write for English audiences and have the exact opposite problem because obviously if in Brazil, as you were saying, people will say, well, this is what they do in Europe, so that's what we shall do here. Of course, in England, if you say, well, this is what they do in France and Germany, they say, well, then we're not doing it here then. Actually, there isn't in the world, and there never shall be, an equivalent to Roger Ebert. But the closest thing that we have in Britain was a film critic called Barry Norman, who had what I secretly suspect that at times both Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert would think is the perfect television format for a film criticism show, where for 25 years he simply sat alone in a black chair and told the audience what he thought about a film with no interruptions or challenges from anybody else. And he was instrumental, and he isn't given enough credit for this. He's thought to be too mainstream and too populist, and he isn't given enough credit in that when he started doing the program in 1973, he wanted to cover subtitled films, and he was very strongly against dubbing, as it seems as if everyone is here. And he was told repeatedly, the English don't go to the cinema to read. And he, partly through championing one particular film, Cyrano de Bergerac, with Gerard Depardieu, when that came out, he insisted on talking about it, and he talked about it not week after week, but on several weeks, which was very rare for his program. And he has brought about, not single-handedly, but he brought about change. And I'm very glad to say that dubbing is now something that is thought of as a crime against cinema in Britain, and I hope that is the state we will soon have everywhere else in the world.
Mm-hmm. Brazilian people that are watching, England is in Europe, you see, so...
Gerardo, you
No, I can assure you England is not in Europe.
Gerardo and then Olivia will go to the next question.
Let me tell you something. In Mexico, if you play a DVD and you see this, if you hear it dubbed in Spanish, and see the subtitles in Spanish, they don't correspond. They don't say the same thing. And I never understood that. But people, I would have to say, most people don't really notice, so it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question with regards to the conversation on dubbing. What about animation? How do you guys feel about it for animation? Because I mean, I've seen, for example, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind with subtitles in the original Japanese, and I've also seen it with the voiceover. And I realize it's not dubbing in the same sense as a live action movie, but you know, those are examples, especially Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, where it was actually done really well.
I consider animation less of a crime to dub for two reasons. The first one is you were taking the whole component of a performance, and you're replacing it with another complete performance. You're not taking just the voice and replacing it. That's one reason. And the second reason is children, because children have difficult reading subtitles, and it's important for them to go to animation films so their love for cinema can develop, so that the audience, the target audience needs the dubbing, so it's less of a crime.
But when you learn when you are accustomed from a childhood to read the subtitles,
but that's
later on you don't even think about it.
I'm really appreciating your conversation with each other, but let's get to another question.
Yeah, okay.
This is an observation and just a question because you were talking about dubbing animation. I feel like all of you, after you finish this panel discussion, we should find a really nice bag of weed.
Is it from California, like in that movie yesterday?
And then watch Scooby-Doo dubbed in Hindi. for about half an hour. I promise you will all change your impressions on dubbing because it's a spiritual experience.
For those of you who saw Funny Business last night, I'd be up for that, but provided the weed is not provided by Honest John, because I understand that does terrible things to a man.
The question is completely unrelated to that. From a film critic point of view, you know, as filmmakers, when we're doing submissions to festivals and the volume of films that are being made right now, you hear these gargantuan numbers, 20,000 films, because of digital technology allowing young filmmakers to kind of experiment. From a film critic point of view, how is that impacting your job in the way in which you're discovering films, and you're writing about films, and kind of profiling movies, that huge plethora of additional content that's kind of coming out there?
How about Michal? How would you respond?
Well, I think this is a very exciting time, and I think it's also very challenging. I think the sort of the times of the critic as the sort of a person who was capable of casting an eye on the whole output, right, or at least making an impression of knowing everything, are gone. I think that this specialization is the only way to go. I think, you know, like if you find some strand of cinema, or I don't know, being national, I don't know, some genre that you really specialize in. I mean, I try to watch as much as I can, and I think that everyone at this table is doing the same thing, but there's definitely the sense of being overwhelmed by how prolific and you know, like how much stuff is out there. And I think everyone knows this feeling of those, I don't know, screeners piling up your desk, or just, you know, like movies that you keep missing. There's no way of keeping up with it, but I think that it's just challenging to sort of find your own way and your own way of looking at it and proposing it to the reader.
Okay, very nice. And let's just get these two questions. Yes, please.
Good morning. I saw a film, Thunder Soul, back in, I believe, August. And the last 10 or 15 minutes, I realized I was the only person in the theater. So I got a short panic, but I enjoyed the film. It was a wonderful film. Does the number of people that are in the theater with you, does that affect what you write? Does it affect what you think of the film?
I actually have just written a piece for the Spectator blog, which I hope gets past my boss, because I've just said now that I've written it for the Spectator blog. And I mentioned I'd seen Funny Business that we saw last night. I'd seen it several times because I'm writing about it for a book, so I'd seen it on DVD. And I thought, you know, I couldn't quote every line, but I could quote parts of the movie with the film. And it occurred to me while I was watching it last night in the Virginia Theatre that the audience was teaching me about the film, things that I hadn't noticed. I had watched it on a stack of DVD screeners, as many critics do, and I thought, well, I'm a film critic, I've got the measure of this film, I've seen it several times. And actually I realized that the laughter that was coming in, the waves of laughter that were coming in for certain jokes and certain stories, showed me how well the film was edited. Because a comedy film, and I think despite being a documentary, Funny Business is most definitely a comedy film as well, is like a comedy routine. You need to you need to leave space for laughter without seeming like you've stalled. You need to leave space for the audience to recover from laughing without seeming like you're pandering for affection. And the audience at the cinema last night taught me how well Funny Business was edited. So I would say that it would be I would like to say that it doesn't make a difference, because I review a lot of DVDs and films where I'm not around other people, but it certainly does. And I think that communal moviegoing really can inform a critic's viewpoint.
Very nice. And the final question, and then I have one last announcement. Yes, please.
You know, as filmmakers, we have to navigate our own personal voices as well as understand the audience that we target. As critics, I imagine that you must also go through that, coming from countries that really enjoy escapist films, but you all have your personal voices and your favorites. How do you navigate that, and how does it impact your criticism?
How about Wael? Why don't you answer that one?
Well, criticism is, it's very personal. At the end of the day, you have to state your opinion, and even if a movie is well made, you have to point it out that it's well made, but you don't like it for this and this and this. And but yeah, it's basically it's very subjective.
I mean, like, for example, in India, Krishna, you have to talk about the Bang. You have to talk about all these other films that are very you know, just not realistic. At the same time, I imagine that you love another kind of film, but if you only talk about those, you're not going to build your voice as a critic. So how do you navigate that
The thing
space.
is, I don't really watch too many Indian movies because I don't know Hindi. But I think there should be a balance between, you know, a person's personal emotional response to a movie. Like, I'm talking from the filmmaker's point rather than a critic. When you're making a piece of art, I'm thinking that you're going through a personal journey, but it should be something that's, you know, relatable to a general audience, a mass. The problem with a lot of Indian cinema is that they're going straight for the masses and trying to be funny, or they're trying hard, basically. But I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but I mean, I know what I'm trying to say, but I don't know how to say it. The thing is, there needs to be a balance between the director's thoughts and his emotions and, you know, what the general audiences would accept. So, and nowadays that's happening in Indian cinema, so.
Okay, I also want to express a very longing heart for our far-flung correspondents who could not be with us. It's Ali Arikan from Turkey, Michael Mirasol, who is from the Philippines to Malaysia, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to Malaysia, to Australia, Aneth White, who is in Los Angeles, Omar Moore, who is in San Francisco, and Sung-Young Cho, who is in South Korea. So they know that we miss them very much, and we'd like to give them a round of applause, and thank you for your time. And a round of applause for our far-flung correspondents. So on the roster for today, 1 o'clock Big Fan, 4 o'clock Kinyarwanda, and 8:30 Terry. Thank you very much, and we wish you the best. Maybe we'll see you next year.